Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Piedmont Pines Undergrounding. And I give it over to Alan. I'm Kelly Shear. I'm in public works, but I'm helping out Alan Law from DOT today because it's my account that I use for training that we're using for the Zoom today. So I'm just going to be in the background if anyone, and I'll be helping monitor questions with Robbie. But other than that, I am just going to be in the background and everybody else is running the show. Does that sound good?
Yep.
You
And
guys,
thank you for helping out, Kelly. And I am Robbie Neely. Most of you who are on this call probably know at least my name. For those of you who who address me as Mr. Neely, now you know I'm not Mr. Neely, but thank you for joining us. As you all know, this has been a long fought for project that is now coming to your hands. Alan Law has been in charge of the city's portion of it. Pat Peronich has been in charge of the Harrison Associates, which is the engineering consulting firm. And Ron Wacker is my sidekick with Piedmont Pines. Before we get started, I want to announce that this call is being recorded because there were a number of people who pled for that because they were not able to make it tonight. So I will post a link to this meeting on our website shortly after the meeting. First, I want to go over some ground rules. This is an informational meeting. It's not a hearing. So with that context, we're here to give you information about the project and what you need to know in order to make an informed decision. Alec will discuss when the ballots are going out and when they're due back and all of the details around that. But I just wanted to make it clear that we are not here to debate whether the project is a good project or a bad project, whether you agree or disagree, but it is, again, so that you will be able to make an informed decision on how you're going to vote. Audience questions. I see a number of you have already seen the Q&A button down below, and I will be looking through the questions to see if we can combine some for efficiency and to make sure that we get the most information out to you without having repetitive information and rehashes. Just one other point, some questions came in about phase 3. We will not be discussing phase 3 tonight. So this is all about phase 2, your boundaries, you're in it. This is really your meeting. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alan Law, who is in charge of the project from the city perspective and manages the whole street lighting affair. Alan, you're on.
Hello, Alan Law, City of Oakland, DOT, Electrical Department, Street Lighting. And tonight, thank you all for attending. I will be doing a PowerPoint presentation. I will be sharing with the slides, and Pat and also Peronich with Harrison Associates was part of the group from the city. Scott Ferguson is the bond counsel. Fred Kelly is the DOT assistant director overseeing this whole program. We have also 2 panelists, PG&E, Lizette Burtis and Linda Schwartz, as well as your Piedmont Pines Neighborhood Association representative, Robbie and Ron. A little history for people who may or may not be aware of the Piedmont Pines project. In 1987, Piedmont Pines requested that the utility lines within the boundary be undergrounded and went before the CPUC, or the California Public Utility Commission, using Rule 20A, which basically set up the allocation of funds for the utility undergrounding of the phone, the power, and the cable lines. When Piedmont Pines finally arrived to the top in 1999, Piedmont Pines finally became on top of the list to underground. And so we proceeded with the tabulation of votes to establish an assessment district. Piedmont Pines Assessment District on May 2000 was established by the City Council under Resolution number 75652. In the pursuing time between 2000 and 2003, there was a lot of discussion between the CPUC and the PG&E, as well as the City of Oakland, based on the changing rules that they were developing for utility undergrounding. So the project scope that was originally envisioned was actually reduced by 50% of the streets that was within the confines of the previous developed location of the. So the city focused on their project on the 3 key corridor: Ascot Drive, Shelton, Carsbrook, and Castle Drive. What PG&E Rule 20A covers or allows is that if there's undergrounding, will avoid or eliminate an unusual heavy concentration of overhead electric facilities. 2, the street or roads or right-of-way is extensively used by the general public and carries a heavy volume of pedestrian or vehicular travel. 3, the streets or road or right-of-way adjoins or passes through a civic area or public recreation area of unusual scenic interest to the general public. And 4, the street or road or right-of-way is considered an arterial street or major corridor as defined in the Governor's Office of Planning and Research General Plan guidelines. And these were the 4 criteria that established that any one of them would qualify for the PG&E Rule 20A in discussion. Per PG&E's requests, as the project proceeded with all 3 streets shown, or all 3 phases, PG&E, being the lead utility, requested that the project be separated 3 phases because of its complexity in this hillside area and also on the sheer size of the project. And this was, at that time, the largest Rule 28 projects in the state. Here is a map of the 3. This was the original boundary, as you see the whole boundary, and was separated by phase 1, which is up Ascot, which has been completed. We're at phase 2 now, which is the blue line, if you can see the blue line. And actually, we started this process in 2017, and then followed by the orange colored line adjacent to the park area for Castle Drive. History of Piedmont Pines Phase 1. In 2008, the design started, and PG&E and the city met with numerous challenges or complexities of the project. By 2011, construction finally proceeded. In the winter of 2014, majority of the utility undergrounding work was completed, and so the project was deemed complete in 2015. So it took us almost from the beginning, 2008 to 2015, 7 years duration. Here's a picture of the Piedmont Pines utility undergrounding. The left side shows how it used to look like with the overhead wires and how it could look like once it's been removed or undergrounded. For the current Piedmont Pines utility undergrounding phase 2, a map of the proposed 223 properties which lie within the boundary of the red line. On May 10th, 2021, the city went to council requesting for the passage of 2 resolutions to start the process for utility undergrounding assessment district. So under the City Council adopted resolution 88630 and 88631, the city is now able to proceed with our next portion of the project, which is Piedmont Pines Phase 2, as is recorded. So for Piedmont Pines Phase 2, the project scope consists of 223 properties along Shelton Drive. Okay, that's approximately 2 miles for the whole project. The total cost to underground all the utility, which is also the PG&E lines as well as telecom lines, and the city line provided power is about $36 million. Of that portion, $4,465,000 would be for the streetlight project, which is their assessment amount. Okay. Individual homeowners estimated is going to be assessed $15,541.68. Within the Piedmont Pines Phase 2, there are 2 city property and also a East Bay Mutt owned property, which will be required to pay the assessment amount also. Here is a preliminary or draft plan that we went out with of the proposed street lighting. This is only a draft, so initial analysis, and so it will be refined and if this project moves forward to the next level. From our community outreach that occurred, over 70% of the property owners in Phase 2 were interested in proceeding with the establishment of the Phase 2 assessment district. Why the city thinks this project is important. It benefits our first responders, OFD, as well as Oakland Police Department, emergencies access. It also improves safety for the residents if evacuation is required. Provides new street lighting system, which also reduces our maintenance needs, as well as actually reduction in PG&E costs for power consumption. Provides better street lighting for the safety of all. Moving to the next important step is the balloting. The ballots, which will be sent to each property owner, is planned to be mailed out on June 4th. And this is a chance for the residents, the 223 residents, to vote for whether they will proceed with this project. Tabulation will occur on June 20th at the City Council meeting. And if their tabulation is favorable, the project will proceed with the city going before council again for resolution to proceed. If the tabulation of the ballot is not favorable, then the city will be proceeding with Phase 3. With the favorable tabulation, which hopefully will proceed, PG&E will take approximately 1 year for the design, another 5 months or so for the bid and award of the project. And construction is estimated for 2 years, leading to project closure at that time before Phase 3. Okay. Now to discussion of the assessment and the costs associated with the project, I will turn it over to Pat Peronich with Harrison Associates.
Okay, hi, I'm Pat Peronich with Harrison Associates, and we're serving as the assessment engineer on this project. And our number one objective, our job on this project is to fairly distribute the cost of the project to the property owners, and so that the assessments are fair. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how we came up with how we spread the assessments to all the property in the district. This kind of gives you a general overview of it. This slide, we're on the slide with the Piedmont Pines Phase 2 assessment formula components. And basically there's 3 elements to how we spread the benefit. And those are the benefit you receive from the aesthetic standpoint, the view by removing the lines and undergrounding the utilities. There is a safety element to it. That comes from a number of things. That comes from emergency responders being able to get to your property sooner if there's because there'll be less down power lines. It's the elimination of the possibility of power lines falling onto your house or property and damaging them and those types of things. And then the third component is what we call a reliability benefit. And it's not really based on the fact that that if your power goes out, it would go on any sooner for undergrounding. That's not really true. It's fairly close on that part of it, but it's that the power would go out less often with undergrounding. And so you benefit from having less service disruptions when it's undergrounded. The way we spread them is the $4.465 million of project costs related to the streetlights is what's being assessed. And the way we spread that is by dividing up the benefit into 1/3 each. So basically, aesthetics is worth 1/3 of the benefit, and reliability is 1/3 of the benefit, and safety is 1/3 of the benefit. And I'm just going to quickly talk about in each one how we assign units. If a property is receiving the full benefit of any one of those things, they are getting 1 benefit point for that particular benefit. If they're receiving something less, then we're reducing it. And I'm going to talk to you about how those how the reductions happen. And in this case, there's not many that are not receiving the full benefit. 209 of the 223 parcels are receiving the full benefit of 1 point each for each of the types of benefit. So for the aesthetics benefit, if your house or has access to a road that has either the overhead lines or the street lights, well, it's just the overhead lines that are going to be undergrounded, you're going to receive the full benefit of the aesthetics because you won't have those overhead lines on your main street anymore. The parcels, there are some parcels in the district that don't have the overhead lines in front of their house. They're receiving service from the overhead lines within the district that are going to be undergrounded, but there are none directly in front of their house. So their aesthetics benefit is reduced, and they get 0.75 instead of 1 benefit unit for aesthetics. For safety, it's a similar issue. If the overhead lines are in front of your home and you use that road to access your property, then you're going to receive the full benefit. We reduce the benefit if there are no overhead lines, just as in the case with the aesthetics. In that case, it would go down to 0.75. And if in addition to that, there are no street lights on the street that you get to your property from, then it would go down to 0.5, because really you're not receiving the same benefit as the others if both of those things are missing. The third item, the enhanced reliability benefit, is again similar. If you have the lines in front of your home, you're going to get the full point. The difference here is, and there's only 1 parcel that actually applies in the whole district, that they don't receive their service from the lines that are going to be undergrounded. So that 1 parcel is not assessed for the reliability benefit because they're receiving service from other lines, and that's the only one that's in that case. So I think, Alan, we can go to the next screen and I can talk about how that distribution looks. So this is an image of the district, and basically all the white area is parcels that are receiving the full benefit of 1 for each of the 3 different benefit factors that we have. And then the shaded parcels are exceptions to those. And then I can talk a little bit about each one of those. The first shaded that I have listed on the left here, 1 parcel, it says has a lower amount. Oh, let me step back a minute. Let me talk about this column here, the table here where it says assessments, project costs, financing cost, and the maximum assessment. Because we're going to be mailing out an opportunity to pay your assessment up front. And if you pay your assessment up front, you're not going to be financing it through the bonds, and you're not going to have any financing costs. So that second column would be eliminated. So as of now, if you're a regular, typical single family home, you'd be on the top line of this table. But if you were to pay ahead of time, that middle column, the $4,757, you wouldn't pay that part of it. You'd only pay the $15,540 up front, and your assessment would be paid off in full. If you choose to finance it, then the financing costs are added and your assessment would be $20,000. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means to you on an annual basis in a little bit. The second item there, the 1 parcel, you can see there that it has a $10,000 project cost instead of the $15,000. That's because we've removed 1/3 of it. That's the 1 parcel. It's right, it's on the upper left-hand portion of the, it's the shaded blue one up there. They're receiving their electricity from below. They're not receiving it from the road above. So that's why they're not paying that 1 portion. It's the only one in the district that doesn't receive their utilities from within the district. The next row are the 2 city parcels, and they're on the bottom portion down there. And those are still receiving the same benefit as all the single family residences. The only reason they're listed differently here is they're not going to be involved in the bond financing. So that middle column is missing, it has 0. The city is going to be paying that assessment in the prepayment period, just like you'll have the opportunity to do. The next parcel listed, or the next row listed, is the East Bay Mud parcel, and that parcel is, yes, right there up at the top. And that one's more because it's a bigger parcel that, if it weren't being used for the purpose it is, would likely have more than one residential unit on it. So that's why their assessment is more for that one parcel than for the rest of them. The last two rows I'm going to kind of talk together about. It's right in the middle section there. You have the 3 parcels, and then you have 7 parcels below that that are in red or pinkish colored. All of those parcels have a reduced assessment, and their reduction comes from the fact that there's either not overhead lines directly in front of their house, or there's not street lighting directly in front of their house. And in the case of the 3 at the top there that are the more bluish grayish color, it's gray, I guess it is. Those are getting, they don't have a street light right there, or the overhead lines right in front of their house. So they have a reduced assessment. I think we can go on to the next screen now, and I'm going to talk about what your payment would be. And I've only done this payment estimate of a high or a low end payment for the regular typical single family residence that's receiving the full benefit. And so if you remember when I talked about that on the previous screen, if they're financing your property or your assessment, it's going to be $20,000 with the inclusion of the bond financing costs. It's going to be around $20,300. Currently, the market on these types of bonds is around 3%. Actually, it's a little over 3. I'm working on another district that's pricing right now, and they're going to be paying just a little over 3% interest, and they're going to be doing a 30-year bond. And I think that's probably a low estimate for what you might be able to get when we finally go out to bonds on these. The schedule calls for that to happen about a year from now, or a little more than a year from now, when the bonds are actually issued. And so we don't know what the market's going to be. So what I've done here is I've shown what it would be if you had a 3%, which would be a real nice rate, and we went with a little longer term of 30 years, then your annual payment that shows up on your tax bill would be a little over $1,000 a year for 30 years. If the rates happen to go up between now and when the bonds are issued, and we can't get as good of a rate, it ends up going as high as 5. And I feel pretty confident that it shouldn't go much higher than that, unless everything goes haywire in the economy so bad that, you know, we don't want to talk about that. So 5 would be a very high rate. I don't think it would go this high. If we only went 25 years, that would make the payments a little higher, because we're not extending it as far as we can to 30. So in that case, your payment would be a little over $1,400. So our best guess is for the range of your payments are going to be somewhere between $1,000 a year or $1,400 a year. And the term will either be 25 or 30 years. And I think that's all I have to present about the method of determining how much your assessment was, and how much you'll be paying if this passes and you choose not to pay it in the cash collection period.
Okay, thank you. So that leads us to the next item, which is question and answers.
There we go. Okay, so I've just been looking at the questions. The first question is, can you describe the type of streetlights that are proposed and how they might mitigate light pollution? Alan, that's for you.
The lights that will be installed will be LED street lights, and since the LED street lights have what is called zero bug, that means the lights does not escape like the previous high pressure sodium lights. There will be no spillage coming from the LED street lights. They call it zero bug rating,
Okay.
which is the Cobra head. They will be Cobra head street lights.
And the Cobra head design was voted on many years ago, actually, when we were before we were divided up into phases. And it was based on the cost of the street lights and the amount of light that they would emit, and allowing fewer lights than some of the more decorative ones. So for those of you who are new to the area, you might have missed that vote. Here's a question from Ellen. When will bond payments begin and end approximately? Pat?
Yeah, so when you pay your assessments, you're going to be paying them on your annual property tax bill that comes out from the county. And you have payments that are due no later than December 10th and no later than April 10th for each fiscal year. So the first time you're going to see a payment on an assessment bond is going to be the fiscal year following when the bonds are issued. So let me make that more clear. We're anticipating that the bonds are going to be issued sometime during 2022 and not prior to July 1. We're thinking it's going to be in the last half of that year. So that means the following fiscal year that begins on July 1 of 2023 will be the first year it would show up on the tax bill. And so your first payment would be in December of 2023. And you would have 30 sets or 25 sets of those payments. So it could end in 2048 or it could end in 2053, depending on whether they're 30-year term or 25-year term.
Thanks. Okay. Is there any assistance for our neighbors on a fixed income? Alan, would that be you?
Unfortunately, there is no assistance program available.
Yeah, if I may speak on that a little bit too. Most of the programs for assessments that have a fixed income or a senior exemption or anything like that, they're usually paying for a maintenance services type situation. Since these are bonds that are issued, there is no way to really take away from one property or unless there's a source of funds that's available, there is no way to have an assistance program. So it would have to come from a special fund that was derived, and that's not the case here. So.
Okay. When will the work take place? I think, Alan, you kind of outlined that, but I think maybe a quick recap is how long each stage will take. It's
Approximately, if it passes positive on July 20th, the design will take approximately 1 year, with another 5 months or 6 months for bidding and awarding, and then 2 years of construction time to occur after that with project closeout.
okay. Who pays to connect the street electrical to our house? This is something that you really haven't gone over in much detail yet, Alan, about the permitting fees, the inspection fees, and all of that. So could you enlighten us?
The connection fee, there is from building services within the city, a charge of about $400 for this electrical connection permit fee. But the assessment, there is allowance of $1,500 for PG&E to provide the connection to each property. As about, I don't know if Linda wants to chime in on that from PG&E. She's on mute.
Turn your volume up, Linda.
Did you hit the mute button on?
No, she's not muted.
Yes, she is. She's no, not anymore.
Uh-oh.
Okay, we'll get back to Linda. But so what you're saying so far, Alan, is that there's a $1,500 allowance for the connection of the utilities for the and 400 but the customer must pay the $400 for the city's permit fee.
Correct.
And what about the trenching? Is there's a freebie there too, right?
There's a trenching. Normally, it allows for 100 feet, but since the line is not directly in the center of the streets, it's averaged out so that some properties might be only trenching, let's say 50 feet, and another one trenching 100. So when you combine 150, that's 75. So it's covered within the PG&E.
And Linda, are we able to hear you yet? Linda Swartz? No. I still can't hear you, but I recall Linda telling me in phase 1 that nobody paid anything above the trenching allowance that was granted. So between the trenching allowance and the $1,500 panel conversion, what's left as the only additional expense is the $400 permit fee. Is that correct, Alan?
To my knowledge, at this, yes.
There are no inspection fees, or the permit fee covers the inspection?
Permit fee covers the inspection by the city staff.
Okay, so how will they pay? How will they pay that $400?
That's being developed so that we can streamline the method, so we can collect from majority of the property owner when the times comes up.
Alan, we had one
I'm working with
question.
building services.
Okay, Alan, on that score, on that issue, one property owner has asked if that fee can be rolled into the assessment, so that it's pretty straightforward, that it's all covered once they pay their assessment. Any comments on that?
Unfortunately, in discussion with Pat Perinich also, that this unfortunately is tied to each individual property directly and cannot be, because it's not related to the street lighting per se. So it's individual property owner's responsibility.
Yeah, it comes down to the, it's a fee, and a fee is treated differently by law according to Proposition 218 than an assessment is. So we can't merge it into the assessment because it wouldn't be, we wouldn't be applying the formula in the way that fees are required to be charged. So it just can't be done legally.
Okay, that makes sense because the other's a capital cost. So, all right.
Who pays to connect the street electrical to our houses? I think we've just covered that. How do the projected costs compare to those of the previous Ascot undergrounding project? And I have that in my files.
Let me take that. I'll take that one. I've done a line by line comparison, and basically we're looking at about a 20% increase in overall project costs from 2017, 2018 to now. The financing costs for floating the bonds has increased by more than that. It's more like around 50%. So basically, if one were essentially paying with cash for the assessment, the increase from the previous cost is about 22%. But if you're bond financing, it goes up about 27% from where it was.
And that is if we're at the, if the costs end up being as high as the estimate is. And so in most cases, the estimate is higher than the cost end up being. And so you don't pay as much, you're going to be refunded, or the assessment that actually gets placed on the property will be less than that maximum amount that we showed you.
And related to that, you might as well answer this one now. One person asked, can you come back to us for more money later? Alan, do you want to address the issue of this being the maximum?
Well, as what's covered, this is the maximum once you pass it as part of a bond measure, and this will be the maximum that you can be charged by the city for and also the bond proceeds to be collected.
Okay, Ellen asks, can we get the slides emailed to us? And yes, I have a copy of the slides, and I assume we can make those public, right, Alan and Pat?
Yes, they are PDF, so they will be available, and hopefully I can have it also inserted into the city's website under undergrounding section, as well as the Piedmont Pines section of that web page. So that will also be available there.
Great. Here's a question from Herbert. We have 3 contiguous lots, one of which is built on and is in the undergrounding zone. The other 2 lots, though, adjacent to the first, have a different street address, which is not in the zone. Are we at risk for being assessed for all 3 lots? Pat?
Yeah, the answer to that is no, because once the assessment is placed, it's set. And so if there were a case where we had thought that a parcel might merge with another parcel next to it, and then you still had just you still have one parcel that would be subject to the assessment. But we thought there were a potential to build 2 units on it. We would have placed an assessment on the one parcel for 2 units instead of 1. I'm saying we didn't see anything that was the case here. I'm interested to know which assessment it is, and I have the name so I can look that up, because once I saw the question, I started looking around the boundaries, and I don't really see too many cases where there's 2 parcels outside that are next to one that's inside that would likely be merged. So I'm not exactly sure which area you're talking about, but in any event, you're not at risk for a higher assessment in that case. Once they're set, once the assessments are set on a parcel, we can't add to them.
Okay. And Herbert, maybe if you want to connect with me, I can connect you with Pat so that we can find out for the specific answer to those.
Yeah, I think I can get it off the last name, so I'll look
Okay.
look it up that way, and then I'll get back to you on it.
Okay. Alan, here's a question for you. How many lumens will the streetlights be?
That is dependent on the photometric analysis that we performed during the design phase. But typical streetlights within Oakland Hills run between 39 watts or 59 watts, but they're ever changing in terms of the General Electric lights or the Philips Lumec light that we'll be using per the analysis.
Okay.
But right now, typically for most residential roadways, it's about 39 watt or 59 watt, but those have been changed over time with new designs of the street lighting fixture.
Okay. The mailed materials indicate that PG&E will cover approximately 85% of the cost. Based on the $15,500-ish per house, that is a total cost of more than $103,000 per house. How can the project possibly cost that much?
Hey guys, it's Linda. I'm unmuted.
Oh, good.
Excellent.
Yay, Linda.
Excellent. Congratulations.
I'm back.
The previous total project cost relative to the question was about $29.5 million. And then I'm just looking at the engineering and construction costs of everything, including PG&E, AT&T, and Comcast, up to 34.7 million or so. So basically that's, Linda and others can talk to how much it costs to underground a mile and that sort of thing. But that's in line with past costs.
Yeah, so basically the project cost, the cost of putting in enclosures, doing the trenching, installing the cable and electric equipment, doing all energizing the underground system, cutting over all of the services, those costs are absorbed by the utilities. The utilities do pay that cost. The residents do get $1,500 credit to convert their panels, and they also get 100 feet on private property of trenching paid for by the utilities. There are subsequent project costs associated with this work, then that is what your assessment is covering. And that is for your streetlight system, your administration, overheads, and I think Alan can speak more to that. But the bulk of the actual trenching, enclosure installation, and equipment installation is paid for by the utilities.
How much
Does
is
that
it
answer
per,
the question?
yeah, how much is it per mile to underground?
So it's about $2 million, give or take, to do the infrastructure, not including the electric. So you've got, you could be up to, $4 or $5 million to underground a mile. So that varies with all of the other utilities. It also varies with the Piedmont Pines area is a little different because we do have a lot of work that's going on in the roadway. There isn't sidewalks. We do have to have, you know, heavier subsurface equipment enclosures because everything is in the street. There's also, you know, traffic control considerations and things of that nature that are unique to the Oakland Hills area. So every project is different, but those are some of the nuances that we encounter when we are working in that area.
Great, thanks, Linda. Jonathan asks, will all of the small side streets have undergrounding right up to the red boundary on the map and then remain above ground just beyond that red boundary? Linda, I think that's for you. That's the old razor pole issue.
Yeah, that is correct. So any properties that are within the underground boundaries will not have wires or a power pole. Now, having said that, we still need to connect to the overhead system that's remaining just outside the district. So in some cases, that may be, you know, we have to add an additional pole outside the district to make that transition from underground to overhead. That's dependent. We try not to do that all the time, but there are certain restrictions with existing poles. If there's a transformer, for example, on the next pole down a side street, we are not allowed to rise on a pole that has an existing transformer on it. So in a situation like that, we would set an additional pole, but that would be outside the district.
Okay. Okay.
Robbie, before you continue on, I want to point out that Scott Ferguson has joined us. So if there are any questions, further questions on bonds,
oh, good.
You'll be able to take those. So
okay. Kelly, could you add him to the panel?
I did. I brought both Scott and Lizette over from attendees to panelists.
Okay, great. Let's see. Is it a simple majority that means we proceed with phase 2? Alan, Pat?
Yeah, I'll take that one. It's almost that, as you would think of a simple majority. A simple majority, it would be favorable, but there's an additional element to that. The vote, the way the law is written, is not whether it's yeses that we're looking at, it's whether they're no's. If no is a majority, then the answer is no. And if yes is the majority, the answer is yes. But if it's a tie, in this case, the answer would be yes. So you don't have to have the majority. A tie goes to the yes in this case. The way it's written specifically, it says that if the majority of no, if the majority is no, it cannot be passed. And that's all it basically says. So, and also the property owners need to keep in mind, I don't think we've talked about it yet, the vote is also weighted. So in this case, most of the parcels have the same voting power of the $20,000 that we have for your maximum assessment. But the voting power for the parcel that we have a reduced assessment on, or the parcels, there's more than one, their voting power is not as high. It's basically $1 per vote. And what we do is we take all the yeses and nos that come in and the value of their vote and add them up. And then if it's $1 more that is no, then you can't, the assessment won't pass. Otherwise it could pass.
Okay. Once our power is undergrounded, will all our neighborhood be exempted from public safety power shutdowns? Linda, you and I have talked about that. Maybe Lizette, you want to weigh in.
I don't believe so. Just because you're underground, it doesn't mean that you may not be subject to a power shutoff.
The way Linda explained it to me once was very descriptive, is that the circuit that might be in danger, it might be not even anywhere near here, but it has to be shut down. And so the whole area that circuit serves will be shut down for safety's sake. So undergrounding and power shutoffs by a circuit are, you know, we may not get rid of those, but power shutoffs due to weather normal weather, rain, wind, I understand that they are segmentized, meaning that it will travel less distance. The damage will travel less distance and be healed faster. Is that correct?
That is correct. So when we go up there and we design the project to go underground, we put additional sectionalizing devices in the undergrounding area. So that's additional switches, what we call interrupters, and those pieces of equipment can actually sectionalize the circuit. So you could have, 600-700 people out of power. Well, if you have additional switches in there and additional ways to backfeed those customers, then the customers impacted could be quite a bit less. So we can't say that we can totally eliminate the PSPS events, nor can we say we can eliminate an outage should a tree fall on an overhead line that feeds an underground district. We can't say that you're never going to have a power outage. But what we can say is those power outages could be smaller, impact less people, and could be less duration, because what we're doing is we're also putting what's called SCADA on there. So it's a remote activator that we can tell when the system goes down, and we can automatically, from our district operations office, reroute that circuit and backfeed those customers much quicker than we would in the past, calling a crew out, having a crew go out there and restore the overhead line that is feeding the underground district. So you have more flexibility there, but having said that, it won't 100% eliminate these events.
Thank you. And let me back up, because I realized that Lizette and Linda came on after we introduced the panelists. Linda Schwartz was the project manager for phase 1. And oh my God, she was just so phenomenal in dealing with every instance of angst within the community. She bent over backwards to make sure that this project was seamless, fast, on budget, on time. And then Lizette Burris is working on the Rule 20A for all of PG&E and has our project in her little bailiwick. And so she advises us on all the utility commission hearings and procedures, and tells us what we can and can't do, and keeps us on our toes. So thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Sure.
Next question is, so we've already talked about what percentage of people are needed to approve this to proceed. When is payment due if paying in full? We've talked around that. Pat, you want to give a little bit more on that one?
Yeah, the current plan is if the assessment passes in July, there'll be a period of time where the design work needs to be done so that the city can start taking bids for the construction to happen. And then we can move forward with bonds after that. I think I mentioned before, we anticipate the bonds to be issued sometime in the second half of 2022. And the plan currently is to open up the cash collection period where you could pay for the assessment up front sometime in spring of 2022, probably around March or so. The assessment law requires a 30-day period minimum for you to be able to pay off your assessment up front. You're going to have a longer period than that. We're expecting that period to be somewhere around 90 to 120 days between March and July of 2022 or something like that.
Okay, great. And if a party sells their home before the bond financing payments are completed, how is the obligation resolved?
The assessment stays on the property, so the new property owner would carry on paying the assessment. We put a lien on the property after the assessment is approved, and it's recorded at the county recorder's office. So any transaction of property, the real estate agent and the buyer would be aware of the assessment and take that into consideration before buying the property, because they would be responsible for it after the transaction occurred.
Okay. Is the bond financing done as an all or nothing process? As in, is it up to individual parcels to choose whether to finance with a bond, or is bond financing done for the entire neighborhood or not, or is it done by vote?
I think I know what that question means. Each individual has their choice of whether to be involved in the bond financing or not. And the bond financing costs are estimated based on an assumption that nobody is going to pay in the prepayment period. During the prepayment period, when you pay, you're paying a reduced amount, and the bond amount that we would issue would be reduced by not only the amount you prepay, but also a portion of those financing costs that are related to that. And the way we can get away with that is the largest portion of the bond financing costs are directly tied to the amount of the bonds being issued. There's a reserve fund, and there are banking costs that are directly tied to the amount. So if we're reducing the amount because somebody prepaid their assessment, we're also going to be reducing the bond financing costs equivalently. So
Great. So another way of saying that is that you can do a combination of lump sum and financing. That's right. You could pay a portion of it, and then you would just be your bond financing costs would go down similarly. Great. Our undeveloped
Robbie?
lots. Yes.
Quick question. I want to just ask if Scott has anything to add. We've been talking about bond financing, and he may have some additional comments on as bond counsel. I just want to give him a chance when we're on the topic. Scott, are you there?
Okay.
Okay.
Are undeveloped lots assessed the same as developed lots?
There are some undeveloped lots that are excluded because they're undevelopable, but those that are undeveloped that are determined to be developable and could have a single family unit on them are treated as if they are on them now. So they do have an assessment on them. So there are no undeveloped lots that could be built on that aren't getting assessed.
None in Piedmont Pines?
None in Piedmont Pines.
Okay. What is included in the assessment, and does it cover all connections between the street and the private home? Yes, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Yeah.
Again, to reiterate what Linda, what has been said earlier, the assessment is only covering the streetlight conversion and the city's administration costs. All of the utility conversions are being paid for by the utilities. Can we get our area rated as lower fire risk for insurance purposes after the project is completed? This is an interesting question that I have been asked a few times, and I think it's up to each individual insurer to determine that. And I think the fact that we are phase 2, you add 23 homes here to 250 homes in phase 1 and another couple by the time we're done, we are going to have reduced our fire risk considerably. And that's a case that you will need to make with your individual insurance company. And for those of you who are not, who have been reading your emails, we're partnering with the Oakland Fire Safe Council, and there is a whole video webinar on the 27th of May. So watch your emails. I'll send out a reminder, but it's solely on the subject of insurance and how we can reduce the number of cancellations that we're experiencing, what's going on at the state level. So I hope you'll join that. Where will trenches be dug relative to the edge of the street and the property line? Linda.
So this is interesting because we have to, once we start design, we have to really take a look at where there's existing utilities. So we have to avoid where there already is substructures in place. So what we learned on phase 1 is box placement is going to be a big deal. Trenching, you know, we restore the street. You don't have too much of an impact. You really don't know where the conduit and the cable and the communications is under the street. However, you do see the utility boxes. So one of the things that we want to do with phase 2 is we want to ensure that those boxes are not in the pathway of the vehicle. So they will either be off the road as much as possible, or they will be actually in the middle of the road. So when you're driving over them, your tires are not hitting those boxes. So that is something that we learned from phase 1. This again is a unique project because we don't have curb and gutter and we don't have sidewalks. That's usually where our infrastructure is installed. So we'll be working around existing utilities and doing the best we can to keep them out of the wheelbase of vehicles.
That will be
So
great.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah.
Yep.
And now that brings me to a question of paving. Alan, invite you to participate in this. We have been begging for shoulder-to-shoulder paving along with this project. And I know that part of Shelton was added to the 3-year paving plan by Sheng Thao in her $1 million allocation of paving funds. But what can you tell us about the current decision-making, or maybe lack of, about shoulder-to-shoulder paving in Shelton in particular?
Unfortunately, I can't answer much about the paving, except the funding does not cover that until I investigate with the paving section with Sarah Fine and discussion with Fred Kelly. So Fred Kelly, who has
Fred has his hand up, Robbie.
Yeah.
So he just joined us. So
Oh,
maybe
good.
he can
Welcome.
address it.
Fred is the head of this whole project. And Fred, you want to weigh in on paving?
Hi, Robbie and Ron. Not quite. Alan is carrying the torch for us. I'm just the assistant director of OCDOT, so sort of the umbrella of, or covering all of the aspects of what OCDOT does. But as far as the paving program goes, I'll try to be succinct. Is that you were correct in identifying that there are locations already identified in the 3-year paving program. And we are now in the process of identifying streets that were not in that program based on pavement condition, equity, and other factors that we are going to be incorporating into what may be a 5-year paving program. But we are a little bit away from that. That will probably be finalized sometime in the spring or summer of next year.
But if we are going to be tearing up these streets and putting a fairly sizable trench down the middle of these streets, and the utilities are going to be paying for, let's say it spans a quarter of the whole street, I'm making that number up, but wouldn't it make sense, if it's going to be within the next 5 years anyway, to go ahead and do it at the same time?
Not necessarily. I mean, it wouldn't necessarily from the standpoint of the criteria used to identify which streets go into the paving program, because again, there are multiple factors that we utilize to make sure that the streets that we identify that was done on an equitable basis. So, I mean, that would be one factor, but it wouldn't be the only factor.
Right, but it would seem to be a cost savings to the city to be able to get these utilities to pay for that much paving on a street that is very badly in need of paving. I understand it's one of, there are lots of criteria, but it would seem to me that the cost savings to the city should be, a pretty highly rated one.
Well, this is sort of an outlier. This is something that is I would say rare, right? This doesn't happen often. So obviously we'll take this into consideration, but again, the criteria that council has adopted is more than likely going to be preeminent in determining which streets go into that 5-year paving program. Will these streets be evaluated? Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Fred, and thank you for joining us. Ellen asked, please don't forget to mention the value of our homes will go up because of lower fire danger and aesthetics. So done, Ellen, thank you. Nicole, if you have an undeveloped lot next to your house lot, will you be assessed for both? I think we've addressed that one. Ellen asks, how disruptive will the construction be? And before I invite Linda to answer this, I just want to tell you what a marvelous job she did in managing traffic. There was a standard set for how long cars would have to wait when it was shut down to one lane. And that was, I can't remember hearing a single complaint that it was ever longer than that. And everybody was, actually pretty thrilled. They were nervous at the outset about the traffic delays and very patient with the process. Linda, you want to add to that?
Sure. So, this project is going to be an impact on you. There's a couple different things going on. That it's invasive to the point where we are on private property, so we know we're going to be trenching from the roadway to your panel, wherever it is. And we're going to be crossing your front yard. We're going to be in your property. And one of the things we did is we talked to every resident. We made sure that they were okay with where we'd be trenching, made sure that the restoration was up to par. What we always like to say is like or better. So even though we're not doing a lot of betterment out there, we want to make the front of your home look as nice as it did before we were there, or a little better. Now the inconvenience is the second part of this. So you've got the leg of this where we're going from the edge of the roadway to your panel, and we're working actually on your property. Then you've got what we've got going on in the franchise, which is what is impeding you from driving up and down the hill. So what we did on phase 1 is we really wanted to engage the residents. We wanted to hear from the residents. We wanted to know if we have a bunch of crews up there and it's more of an invasive approach, but it's a shorter duration, would you prefer that, or would you prefer minimal amount of crews up there for a longer duration? So I think we would do that for the same for phase 2, and we would leave it up to the residents. Phase 1, they chose to get it done as quick as possible, which meant we had quite a bit of crews on the hill. So what we did was we talked to the residents and we said, what's an acceptable time limit for you to have to wait? And I think there wasn't anyone that had to wait over 3 minutes. 3 minutes is a long time when you're sitting in your car. It's almost a song, right? You're sitting there. So that was the maximum. So what we did was we tried to keep it under 3 minutes, and we usually had it to be between a minute and 2 minutes to where you were waiting if we had to actually stop traffic and have one-way traffic. We also engaged the customers when we were trenching in front of your driveways. That's another thing that, you're coming home with groceries, you want to be able to pull into your driveway. So when we're trenching in front of your house, what we did was we made sure that the crews had steel plates available, and they can put those plates, install them, and remove them at a moment's notice. So you had access to your driveway all the time.
I thought they carried the groceries.
They did, yeah. Yeah. So they yeah, they became quite a part of the community up there. But you know, one of the things is ingress and egress, right? That's very important. You know, we talk about groceries, but you know, what if an ambulance or a fire truck needs to get up there? So we were in close contact with all the emergency responders. We made sure that everyone had access 100% of the time. So that's very important. But you know, keep in mind, you know, there again, you know, we are going to be working on your property. We are going to be up there. We have the best of the best crews working on this. We had a great experience in phase 1, and I'm hoping we can do even better on phase 2. And any issues that you guys have, if there's something that's not going well, I know on phase 1, we had a resident up on Skyline that wanted additional street sweeping. So, you know, get a hold of us, let us know, and we get additional street sweepers out there. That's part of my job, to make sure that things are going well, that you guys have somebody to reach out to day or night. And if you have any kind of an issue, we address it right away. And that's what we take pride in. And that's what we want to continue on phase 2.
And I can vouch for the fact that Linda handled every single thing I lobbed her way, and she took care of everything that she reached out enough that people weren't even coming to me, they were going directly to her. So hats off again to you, Linda.
Hey, no problem. You know what? I enjoyed it a lot, and I still hear from residents up on phase 1 when they have a power outage.
So while we have you, this question I don't see here yet, but there's a $1,500 credit for panel conversion, for the electrical panel conversion. In what circumstance would a customer or resident need to pay more than $1,500? What kinds of power requirements would draw more than that?
So
I can just make a comment here real quick, Linda. The city actually signed the panel conversion agreement.
Great.
And Alan and Fred, I mean, by doing that, you're basically asking us to manage the panel conversion agreement, to manage the panel conversions and utilize your work credits for that work.
Mhm.
You understand that, right?
Yeah, but if people are asking, would I ever have to pay more than the $1,500, and under what
Well,
circumstances?
the $1,500, if a city or a county chooses not to utilize their work credits for the panel conversion work, then we go back to what's in the tariff.
No, but we are using it. We are using it for this project.
Correct. That's why the $1,500 doesn't apply to you.
What?
Right.
Let me ask Lizette, let me try it this way.
Okay.
We have been told that there's a $1,500 allotment per home for panel conversion. But if the conversion of the home's the meter at that home costs more than that, then the property owner would have to pay the difference.
Okay. Okay. I'm not aware
That's
of that
all.
then.
Yeah, and
Then
so the question
then just
is,
forget
how
what I
often?
said. Yeah.
You scared
How
me there,
often does
Lizette.
that happen?
Okay. I wasn't aware of that.
Okay, Linda, could you give us, did anyone in phase 1 have to pay more than the $1,500?
Yes,
I mean,
they did,
exceed.
and only because, so if you have a 100 amp panel on your home, some of them were even, you know, a 75 Qs system that were older homes up there. But say you have a 100 amp panel. Well, you would like to go to a 200 amp panel, or I don't think we had any 400 amp panels, but possibly in phase 2. Say you have an electric vehicle and you want more power. Any type of a service upgrade will be, the expense of that will be borne by the property owner.
So
we will do like for like.
yeah. So the 100 to 200, you know, you mentioned an electric vehicle, so that's a good example. What would other examples be? where they would need a
You know,
200.
yeah, if you have a swimming pool, or not, it's not likely up, up in that area, but if you have, you have a shop and you want to run some additional power tools, or you just want a 200 amp panel, you just want more power, you have more,
Okay.
Yep.
more
So it's generally
appliances.
for panel upgrades.
Yeah, it's only for panel upgrade. So if you contact, so what we'll do is we'll ask you during the design phase. We'll say, hey, you have a 100 amp panel. Is that good for you? It's been good for you for X number of years. Are you good with that? Great. Standard is 200 amp panels for new construction. So if you would like to upgrade to a 200 amp panel, then the difference of that cost we would collect from the property owner.
Okay.
If you just want your service to go from overhead to underground, and you're not adding a bunch of load, and you don't want additional power, then you should be fine with the service conversion agreement that's signed. The other thing that we did on phase one is trenching up to 100 feet on private property. Now, what we did is we averaged that. Not everyone has 100 feet of frontage from edge of asphalt, from property line to your panel. Some people have 60 feet, and some people have 40 feet. Some people had 110 feet. We averaged that, and we absorbed the cost of the trenching to the two homes. And looking at the properties, I don't see where there'd be really any issue with this. There's not huge properties, houses set really far back, that this would even be a concern. We had one, as you know, Robbie, down by the schools,
Yeah.
by Scout, and we ended up, taking care of that.
Yeah.
Because again, on an average, it was an average 100 feet per service. So hopefully that makes sense.
It does. And here's a follow-on question. Do we have to hire our own contractor to make the connection to our circuit box?
I don't know where we're at with the city, but typically what we like to do is we like to get our own electrician, and we like to have that electrician do all of the service conversions. They work closely with our overhead line crews to cut the service at the weatherhead and convert you guys to the underground service. Typically it's a little more challenging if you have multiple electricians up there trying to coordinate with our crews. But again, that's something that, that the city would make that determination.
Along with the city, I would concur with what Linda stated, so.
We will use one contractor, or the PG&E will coordinate that.
Mhm.
Great. That will be a big help to residents not having to hire their own contractors. Here's an interesting one. This is from Eric. Has the city considered purchasing interest rate futures to hedge against bond rate increases? Pat?
Yeah, this is a great question, actually. The reason I say that is when I talked about the annual payment that you would be making, and I showed you the different interest rates and terms, you could see a big difference in the payments. And most of that was based off of the interest rate, even though I had different terms. So since I saw that question, I've been looking to see, using the same term, what would the payment difference be? And the difference between 3% and 5% for a 30-year bond, the 3%, your payment would be about 78.5% of what it would be if the bonds end up going out at 5%. So that's quite a big difference. And if you could hedge against that, that would be great. Now, to answer the question, I don't actually know the answer to that question, and I'm going to have to bring that up with the firm that will be underwriting the bonds when we go out to that. They may, behind the scenes, have considered that or do consider that, and it may not be feasible for the type of transaction they're going to do. I've never seen one, but that doesn't mean it couldn't be done. And I'll bring it up at the next meeting we have with the financing team, which is scheduled for not next week, but the week after, so that they think about it, or they tell me it's not feasible on these types of bonds. I'm not sure. But to carry that a little bit farther, again, the assessment we're giving you is the maximum. So if interest rates do come in lower, your assessment is going to be lower than that amount. And so they may be able to use some of the financing costs to purchase that type of insurance that would hedge against higher rates. I just don't know if it's feasible or not. So I'll find out. And you would benefit if it is.
Stay tuned.
So if I could jump in, this is Scott Ferguson.
Yeah.
I finally managed to unmute myself. I apologize earlier. But I can say I have not seen something like that for an assessment district where we do the formation and then the actual debt issuance happens a year out. And my suspicion is that it would be prohibitively expensive because we would have to, or
I think it probably
the
would
underwriter
be.
would have to go out and actually purchase something, have the city purchase something. So I think the reason that neither Pat nor I have seen it is that it just doesn't pencil out.
Yeah.
Okay. Barbara asks, I may have missed this one, but if the votes favor establishing a district, can an individual homeowner still opt out? And are we protected against cost overruns? Alan. You're muted, Alan.
Once all the people have come in, all the votes has been tabulated, the procedure is that all 223 properties will be assessed accordingly. So there is no option to opt out. And the cost that's shown is the maximum amount that will be charged per each of the property assessed, the rate.
Okay. Will fiber optic be installed? This is a question we had a lot in phase 1. Linda? Lizette?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So there is some fiber optic up there. I believe Extenet is up there.
Yeah.
And of course, anything that Comcast currently has up there will be part of the joint trench. And Extenet, we have met with them and they will be participating in the joint trench. At this time, I don't believe that they are increasing their footprint up there, but what they do have will be converted to underground.
Okay. And by the way, let me just back up a bit. Every month we have a conference call with all the utilities and the city and Piedmont Pines, where we hammer out some of these details. And Extenet has been a part of that. We've kind of excused the other utilities for the last several months because the details that we've been hammering out really relate to PG&E, the city, and Piedmont Pines. But just to let you know that we are in very close association. And once we get into the construction and design phase with the other utilities. Let's turn to Chris. Should a new cable service provider gain access to the Oakland market, will they have access to the underground utility conduit? Linda.
So you're asking if a new fiber person comes in 2 years after we have the project completed? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, how easy is it to add a new provider into the existing trench?
We can add fiber into the trench, and typically when we go to the utilities and we ask for designs, typically the utilities do put spare conduit in. I mean, we are opening up the street. We are, trenching this whole way, and we are putting in conduit. So typically we have spare conduits in there. I know PG&E does for capacity reasons, future capacity. And I know the communication companies do as well.
Okay. Bonnie and Jerry ask, homeowners have the option of paying all or a portion of the assessment up front. if paying some of the assessment up front, the amount they would be paying on their tax bill would be less than your examples, right? Homeowners could also take out a personal or home equity loan to pay the assessment and probably get a better loan rate and shorter payback period. Pat?
Well, I would say yes to the first question, the first part of that statement. And the second part, I can't say for sure that they would get a better rate, but they're definitely allowed to do that.
So it's something for people to explore when the time comes.
They can explore that. Yeah, I don't know. I can't speak to the ability to get a better rate on a refi than the rate they're going to get.
Oh, and I see that Herbert has given you his address for that question about the 3 properties.
Yes, and I've looked at that, and we looked at. I'm going to kind of be answering the very last question on the list as well at the same time, because somebody asked about Terrace Brook and Exeter on the corner there, and we looked at everything on the boundary line all the way around, and we have notes specifically for all those parcels as to why they were not included and why the line was drawn where it was.
Mhm.
And Mr. What was the name again? Weingard, he has his phone number listed, and I can call him back on that.
Great.
For that.
All
And
right.
the other one was Betts at the end. If Betts wants to give us the phone number, I can call them back on that, on theirs.
Great. Okay. There's a question about having access to Sonic fiber optic internet, and I can actually answer that because I've been in contact with Dane Jasper, the owner of Sonic, who explored with Linda the idea of joining the trench for phase 1. And his answer when I asked him about phase 2 is he discovered it was way more expensive to join a trench than to do his own thing. So Sonic is not going to be part of this phase 2. Let's see, if electrical and phone lines connect to your property at different locations, for example, on a lot that is at a street corner with phone lines on one street and power lines on the other, will the assessment cover the cost of reconnecting phone lines as well as the electric lines?
Can you repeat that, Robbie?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
So they, the home has electrical coming from one pole and phones coming from another pole. Will the assessment cover the cost of reconnecting phone lines as well as the electrical lines? Yes, right?
Yeah, anything that originates within the district will be undergrounded.
Right.
Yep.
Can you explain in more detail what the safety benefits are of the undergrounding the power lines? Does it reduce the fire risk of fire? I think we've covered that one. And Jay Takaro, if you want to ask me in more detail, just send me an email to info@piedmontpines.org.
You know, I can do a real quick reading of what it says in the engineer's report. It would take probably 30 seconds at most. The safety benefit is broken down into 3 different things where you're receiving benefit related to safety. The first one is, and I'm going to just go ahead and read right from the engineer's report. The first relates to the elimination of the threat to structures of property being damaged by downed utility lines and poles caused by earthquakes, high winds, and other unforeseeable events. The second element of the safety benefit is related to the removal of fixed obstructions from the right-of-way and the potential delay of emergency responders. And then the third one relates to the street lights, add illumination in the event of darkness, which happens every day, and that makes it a safer neighborhood. And I know you have street lights there already, but it's going to be enhanced illumination with the with what they're doing there. So.
Can you combine an empty lot adjacent to your house into one property to prevent being assessed from both properties? So this is the question about merging properties.
Yeah, again, we've looked at all of them, and I would, besides the 2 that I asked for the phone number, and I have them now, and I'm writing them down. Patrick Wilson also asked the question about that, and I encourage anybody else that has a question about that to just put your phone number in the questions. I'll write them down, and I will call you on your specific property.
Great. Or you can always email me at info@piedmontpines.org, and I can get the question relayed to Pat if it's after this meeting. So I think we've talked about this one during construction. What can we expect in terms of traffic impact? Linda had a magnificent traffic management plan, and it worked. And I would expect the same thing to be true of this one. At the end of the project, will streets be repaved? We've talked about that. And Piedmont Pines will not let go of that little puppy, by the way. When electrical panels are converted to an underground connection, is it also possible to simultaneously upgrade service to a higher amperage panel? We've talked about that. Streets be repaved. Is the trenching trenchless, or will our driveways and walkways be torn up? Yeah, Linda, has there been any discussion of trenchless trenching, or is that impossible in a massive project like this?
You know, it's really impossible. We have our conduit bundles are so large that bore would be very significant. We will definitely, to include all of our conduits for all the utilities needed in that conduit package, we will need to trench.
Yeah. John and Sarah Betts asked where about the hours of construction where traffic would be impacted. And again, as Linda mentioned, we did a survey at the onset of phase 1 to see what people wanted. And we will do another one for sure, and make sure that it, the way most people want it. And my guess is that most people are going to want it done longer hours and shorter duration, just like they did in phase 1. But we'll let you vote on that one. May we reach out directly via email to the presenters in this meeting with parcel specific questions? Yes. And why don't you come through me at info@piedmontpines.org so I can relay it to the right presenter. Tony asks, we have a grand new driveway installed just recently. Do you need to open up my driveway to connect to the panel on the house? Linda had some really creative solutions for people. Linda, you want to answer that one?
Yeah, so again, it's going to require the involvement of the property owner. We had some interesting things happen on phase 1 where we assume we would want to go. This is kind of a funny example, but we figured, well, we're going to want to go in the lawn. We don't want to mess up the person's driveway unnecessarily. You've got nice stamped concrete or whatever you have, but in this case, it was just a typical driveway. So we kind of made the design that, the trench path, what we would do. We talked to the property owner, and he said, I really don't want you trenching there. That rose bush is sentimental. It was given to me by a family member that's passed, and I really don't want the roots messed up on that. But by the way, in a couple months, I'm going to be replacing my driveway. So if you could rip it out for me, that'd be great. So we ended up trenching through the driveway. So it's just that personal contact that we really need. I mean, we get there and we see a nice retaining wall, or we see stamped concrete, and there's a path to get from your house and not disturb things like that, then that's definitely what we're going to do, because again, we're going to replace it like or better. So we want the most efficient and the most direct route to get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to do. But then we want to make sure that that's, what the property owner wants as well.
Here's another question about Sonic. If Sonic is not trenched, does that mean that we will still have overhead lines for the Sonic fiber, or do we lose Sonic connectivity? My understanding from Sonic is that they would do their own trench. What's your thought, Linda? That's
correct. If they opt out of the joint trench, that means it's their responsibility to dig their own trench and to install their facilities, because at the end of the day, when you have an underground district, the poles will not remain.
Right, and they can't attach them. Right,
okay.
They can't attach them to the light poles. Okay. Okay, it looks like, wait a minute, there's one more. So we may have to factor in the price of driveways and walkway replacements. No, right?
Do
You're
they
gonna
have, do they have to,
Do they have to factor in the price of driveway and walkway replacements? Because you said earlier that you were gonna
No.
replace it like or better.
yep, that's on the utilities to get you guys your service to your homes. That's
Yeah.
on us.
Yeah. That is the end of the questions. The rest of them are giving Pat Pernich his telephone numbers that he needs to investigate specific properties. Are there any other questions that haven't come in yet? My goodness, this seems like a wrap. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Alan, for pulling together the city's part, and Pat and Lizette and Linda and Ron and I are both here for you all to answer your questions as they come up in the next several weeks. We've pretty much devoted ourselves. Ron, do you want to add anything?
No, I'm really pleased with how this went. And like Robbie said, if you have any follow-up questions, just send them to us.
Yeah. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Thank you for all the participation, especially Kelly Scher for assisting from Public
Yes,
Works.
Kelly, thank you.
Thank you.
No problem. It wasn't that bad, I guess. I was, there's that fear factor of, oh, is this going to be awful? It was great. You guys are wonderful.
All right.
All right.
Guys.
Good night,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Good night.
Night.
Bye, guys.